Alrighty, welcome back to the Blue Room. We break down two opponents, analyzing their strengths and their weaknesses to reach a conclusion on which fighter comes out victorious. And in this episode, we'll be covering Canelo Alvarez vs Jermell Charlo, which is scheduled to take place on September 30th, 2023 at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Now, to go into this fight assuming Jermell is going to get starched is in my mind ridiculous, because amongst a plethora of things to consider, the blueprint to defeat Canelo exists. And if Jermell steps up his fight IQ for the most important fight of his life, I envision him getting the victory. Now this is an ongoing series, so if you're a fan of boxing, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to help a small channel grow. So before we dive into the technicalities, let's first take a look at the tail of the tape. Let's start with the OG himself, Canelo Alvarez, who has won multiple world championships in 4 weight classes from light middleweight to light heavyweight, including unified titles in 3 of those weight classes and lineal titles in 2. He has a boxing record of 59 wins, however 2 notable losses to both Floyd Mayweather and Dimitri Bivol. He has a height of 5'8" inches, a 70.5 reach. At 33 years old, some might argue that he's in the prime of his career. I would beg to differ, and Canelo fights in the orthodox stance. So let's make some comparisons here. Jermell Charlo is the current undisputed light middleweight world champion, having held the WBC title since 2019, the WBA, IBF and Ring Magazine titles since 2020, and the WBO title since 2022. He has amassed a record of 35 wins and 1 loss, which he avenged against Tony Harrison via KO, as well as 1 draw, which he also avenged in his last fight via KO versus Brian Castano. Jermell stands 6 foot in height with a reach of 74 inches. He is also 33 years old and he fights in orthodox stance. So we do have some things to consider here. Canelo Alvarez has a stronger boxing resume, fighting the likes of Triple G, Miguel Cotto, and of course Floyd Mayweather. Charlo has both the height and reach advantage, and although both men are of the same age, I would argue that Canelo is on the decline, both in drive and motivation and wear and tear. As for Charlo, 2 of his last 3 fights suggest he has the ability to adapt, and in devastating fashion. Now it's at this point where I know many of you will say that Charlo has glaring holes in his game, and I agree. So let's cover both fighters' strengths and their weaknesses. And if you enjoy the video so far, please hit that like button. Beginning with Jermell Charlo. Now Charlo is a good fighter with the potential to be great if he can make some adjustments in this fight, which I believe he can and he will, because the blueprint is there. I would consider him more the jack of all trades. He has a good jab, he knows how to use it under pressure, as we saw in his fight against Castano, where the pressure of Castano, who for context was undefeated when they fought, forced Charlo to fight on the back foot. And it was this scenario that really showcased Charlo's footwork, his ability to stay calm under pressure, and with that pressure showcase what I believe to be one of his biggest strengths, his stamina. Now his jab is not only accurate, it's a stiff jab. He doesn't use it just to keep his opponent at bay. He'll use the first jab to find his range, but he'll commit with the follow-up jab, sometimes closing with a 3rd jab, but more often than not the right cross. I would argue that his lateral movement has improved since his Tony Harrison fight, which gets him out of trouble when he chooses to disengage, although it takes him some time to find his rhythm for his footwork to move into full effect. You can see vast improvements in his distance keeping, staying just outside of range, making use of slips to utilize what I believe to be his best weapon, the left hook. And he is proving time and time again that it could be one of the best left hooks in the game, specifically when he counters with it. He generates a lot of power even when he's doubling it up. You can see the grimace on his opponent's face, and from what I remember, he's had 2 fights where his opponents look like they're having convulsions. I mean, the man's power cannot be denied. Sure, these are not the household names everyone is aware of, but relative to his own progression in his era, in his weight class, these were all worthy challengers, especially Castano, who he was able to fold like a deck chair despite the immense pressure Castano forced on Charlo. And with Castano, that leads me on to some of Charlo's weaknesses. Charlo does have a tendency to leave himself open when he's countering with the hook, especially when he's under pressure. There are moments where he could be circling out and countering down the middle. In fact, in regards to defense, the same could be said for his chin, which he keeps tucked on the defense, but tends to be left open when on the offense. It's in these heated moments where his wild tendencies put him at risk to getting clipped by a left hook, and it could all be summed up to lack of composure. There are times where he looks extremely professional, but there are also times where he can look like an amateur, and those amateur tendencies are fueled by emotions, whether on the offense or on the defense. These are tendencies he cannot afford when going up against the crafty veteran Canelo Alvarez. Now, when breaking down Canelo's strengths, we have to acknowledge that overall he is a very well-rounded boxer. He has great timing, accuracy, counter-punching, head movement, and hand speed. Again, he's a veteran in the game, and he's proven, despite the odd hiccup, that he can adapt to different weight classes and body types. Now, I will expand on those strengths in a second, but I had to mention them before bringing up what I believe to be his biggest strength, which is, in my opinion, his durability. Canelo is like a sponge, and he thrives on the smell of fear when they start to doubt the strength of their own offense. You start to see Canelo let loose and showcase a unique punch selection. Not necessarily combinations, but hooks and crosses, which are often offbeat, as well as setting up those hooks with feints and pouring jabs, which he uses to measure, but also get a defensive reaction of which he can counter when Canelo is fighting opposition who have a reach and speed advantage. Canelo has various styles and game plans to shift the momentum back in his favor. Against Erislandy Lara was getting the better of Canelo for 3 rounds, until in the 4th, Canelo switched gears and put on a clinic to the body, not only going for the finish, but with the intention to slow down the faster fighter. In Canelo's fight against Callum Smith, which by the way I highly recommend if you're a fan of boxing to give it a watch, Smith, who is 6'3" with a 78-inch reach, was holding his own against Canelo in the earlier rounds of the fight, and many questioned why Canelo was fighting outside of range with a longer fighter. However, this is all part of Canelo's game. He lets his opponent get comfortable so that when he switches gears, putting on the pressure, utilizing slips, it gives him that psychological edge as the fight progresses. And in this case, Canelo put an absolute whooping on Callum Smith's arms, striking with such ferocity, Smith stating after the fight he was in immense pain, and it led him to be on the back foot, relying on the jab, which was essentially a trap set up by Canelo, who is extremely efficient at countering jabs and throwing one of his own. Now, before we get to the keys to victory for both fighters, we can lead into the blueprint of how to defeat Canelo by exposing his weaknesses. So with that being said, let's explore Canelo Alvarez's most recent loss against Dimitri Bivol. Now, Canelo went up in weight for this fight, both fighters weighing in at 175. And with Bivol being the naturally bigger man, he also wasn't weight drained, which is a benefit to a fighter's durability. The story of this fight was Bivol's stiff jab and his composure from round 1 to 12. Bivol never gave Canelo a chance to settle. Not only was he keeping Canelo at bay with the jab, but he was also intercepting Canelo's combinations. Bivol was prepared for Canelo to target his arms, so Bivol would stay just out of range, either pivoting or pulling his arm back, but then repositioning himself to keep Canelo once again on the end of his jab. Now, anytime Canelo appeared frustrated and more stationary than usual, Bivol would open up with a flurry of heavy hooks, at times testing Canelo's durability and leaving Canelo more and more frustrated as the match continued. And this was mainly due to Bivol's consistency to remain composed, to keep his chin tucked, his guard high, and making use of his physical advantage, his reach and size. Canelo had no answers for Bivol that night, and to be frank, Canelo appeared to be deflated, mentally broken. Much of this was due to the masterclass performance from Bivol. However, I think it's always fair to consider the optics, and I would argue that from round 1, Canelo did not appear to be his usual self. He was slow, even more flat-footed than usual, his timing was off, and he was throwing hooks in slow motion. With that being said, I don't think it takes away from Bivol. I think he would have still won the fight, utilizing the same game plan against a Canelo in top physical and mental condition. But if there's one thing we've learned about Canelo and his 2 losses, he struggles with boxing technicians who have a strong defense and can keep him at bay with a stiff jab. And that leads me on to the keys to victory for both men. Bivol is 6 foot tall with a 72-inch reach. Jermell Charlo is 6 foot tall with a 74-inch reach. Charlo is going up in weight class. The likelihood is he'll be in top condition, so he won't be depleting himself, and I like to think he'll be building on his core to aid in his stability, his balance, and his punching power, specifically his stiff jab. You see, I believe that Charlo has the IQ and the body type to follow the Bivol blueprint in defeating Canelo. However, Charlo needs to remain composed, and I think that a composed Charlo who keeps his chin low, who doesn't fold under pressure, and remains engaged with Canelo on the outside, making Canelo pay with the stiff jab. Every time he tries to enter the pocket, Charlo will stand a chance in winning this fight, going to a decision. I think Charlo puts himself at risk trying to take Canelo out, and I think with Canelo's defense and durability, Charlo would really have to pick his moments to attempt to go for a finish. If you think anything I say is completely off, or you agree, let me know down in the comments. As for keys to victory for Canelo, whether you agree with me or not, I've analyzed multiple Canelo fights, and he didn't seem himself the night he fought Dimitri Bivol. I believe first and foremost, Canelo's preparation for this fight will play a large role in the outcome. Working on his speed, his stamina, his timing will allow him to counter Charlo's jab, to pull on a relentless pressure from rounds 1 to 12, utilizing his full tool set, but also giving him confidence that he has the stamina to keep this up for 12 rounds. I'm not the only one picking up on Canelo's decline. Mayweather has alluded to it too, and we have yet to see Jermell Charlo at a higher weight class, just as we hadn't seen Terence Crawford at a higher weight class, and he put on the best performance of his life. Charlo also has nothing to lose here, and he's chasing greatness. So to conclude on this, Canelo needs to be able to present that danger that typically puts his opponents on the back foot because they're surprised by his counter ability, his speed, and his power. Canelo has already showcased all the tools needed to beat Charlo, but relative to his motivations, he needs to train accordingly to ensure that the tool set is readily available from rounds 1 to 12. So the big question, who do I have winning this fight? Well, at surface level, I understand why it's easy for people just to pick Canelo based on his boxing resume and his legendary status. However, take the time to compare his fights within the last 4 years. It's clear to see whether it be motivation, wear and tear, Canelo has shown decline. Jermell Charlo, on the other hand, I believe has the momentum in his favor, and if, and that's a big if, he tightens up his glaring holes and follows a game plan at least similar to Bivol, which I know he has the capabilities to do, I'm picking Charlo to win by decision and hurting Canelo in the process. I'm fully aware this is a controversial take, so let me know in the comment sections your thoughts and I'll be happy to elaborate. If you enjoy technical boxing breakdowns, please consider subscribing, and if you've got this far, then hit the like button to help a small channel grow. Have a great weekend, guys, and I'll see you soon. Peace.